Well, hello everybody. I'm Dr. Amir Rashidian, and with my friend Pastor R. Dallas Green, and we're going to kind of pick up where we left off last time. And to do that, we're going to let Pastor R. share the word with us to start. So go right ahead.
Well, this is from Numbers chapter 20. Reading, it says that in the first month, the whole Israelite community arrived at the desert of Zin, and they stayed at Kadesh. Now, Kadesh was a place they had been to before. About 40 years earlier, it was a place where Moses had sent the 12 spies out.
Oh, wow.
And they came back, and 2 of them had the faith to believe that they could be given the land.
That's right.
And they were given fruit from the land. But 10 of them did not believe, and they spread unbelief through the whole community.
Right.
So for 40 years,
Wow.
people wandered. For each day they went into the promised land, 40 days. 1 year they wandered. And now most of that community had died. In fact, it says that Miriam died, who was the sister of Moses and Aaron. And she was buried there at Kadesh. So from this mountaintop, Moses could look across and see the beautiful promised land. Now here's the problem, verse 2. There was no water for the community. Now Kadesh was an oasis.
Right.
And usually there would be sufficient water to give everybody something to drink.
Right.
But now the well had run dry.
Wow.
And the people gathered in opposition to Moses and Aaron. Now there was much, as was true over the course of his
Right.
leadership, there was a lot of grumbling, complaining. He kind of became the scapegoat.
Right.
And they quarreled with Moses and said, if only we had died with our brothers who fell dead before the Lord. They wish they were dead. Why did you bring the Lord's community into this desert that we and our livestock should die here? Why did you bring us up out of Egypt to this terrible place? Now they forgot that in Egypt it was a terrible place.
Oh, yeah.
They were slaves.
That's right.
And a slave works, 7 days a week, 12 hours a day. There's no break for a slave. There's no rest. A slave works for his food.
Right.
Under harsh treatment. It has no grain or figs or grapevines or pomegranates. Now, ironically, they forgot the hardship of
Right.
slavery, and they remembered the food of Egypt.
Wow.
And there was no water to drink. So there was a legitimate problem. The people were thirsty. They wanted water to drink, but now they're grumbling against their leader. Moses and Aaron went from the assembly to the entrance to the tent of meeting and fell face down, and the glory of the Lord appeared to them. And the Lord said to Moses, take the staff. Now, remember the staff, the very staff that he stretched out over the Red Sea.
Right.
And Pharaoh and his army were all drowned in the sea.
It's the same way it turned into a snake.
Turned into a snake and swallowed up the magician's
Right.
snakes.
Yes.
Well, take the staff, and you and your brother Aaron gather the assembly, and I want you to do something. I want you to speak to that rock before their eyes, and it will pour out its water. And you will bring water out of the rock for the community to drink, and their livestock can drink.
It's amazing.
So God gave a very simple solution
Right.
to their problem.
Speak to the rock.
Speak to the rock. So whenever something is taken from us, a provision, God wants to be the substitute for that provision. He wants to be our provider.
Right.
He wants to take care of us. He'd given them, manna for those 40 years.
That's right.
And when they became thirsty, he gave them water to drink. And it says in the New Testament that Jesus was that rock. The rock that followed them. So God was taking care of his people. And this is what Moses did. He and Aaron gathered the assembly together in front of the rock. And Moses said to them, listen, you rebels. Must we bring you water out of this rock? Somehow Moses forgot that God was their provider, and he himself would bring the water out of the rock. He was now feeling as if he was their provider.
Wow.
He was angry with the people.
Right.
Over time, this grumbling, complaining kind of built up inside of him.
Yeah.
Now he was livid, angry. You remember that Moses before had shown his anger when there was an Egyptian beating on
That's right.
an Israelite.
That's right.
And he killed the Egyptian.
Yes.
He looked either way and he ran away.
Yeah.
He's full of anger then. And maybe this was his besetting sin. He was prone to get angry. So
And he did break the tablets too, didn't he?
he broke this thing. This is upset the people. He came down, they were eating and drinking, reveling, and he broke those tablets.
Right.
And Then Moses raised his arm and he struck the rock twice with his staff. He had anger inside of his soul, and now he dishonored God.
Right.
And water gushed out, and the community and their livestock drank. God still provided for his people. But the Lord said to Moses, because you did not trust in me enough to honor me as holy in the sight of the Israelites, you will not bring this community into the land I gave them. I'm going to disqualify you from leadership because you treated me with dishonor, disrespect. See, Moses was a man like we are, but he was a man who had enormous anger. He did not process his anger well.
Right.
And lost his position of leadership because of this. I'm wondering what happens to us when we become angry, Dr. Ray?
Physiologically speaking, not much good happens when we're angry.
Yeah.
However, I have to say that, just like we've mentioned in the past, that the human body doesn't do anything to reduce our chance of survival. In fact, everything the body does is for the purpose of increasing our chance of survival. So once we allow the emotion of anger to fill us, certainly physiologically other things change. Adrenaline gets released, where your adrenal glands over your kidneys release the adrenaline. They release the stress hormone called cortisol, which actually is an anti-inflammatory. It's designed to reduce inflammation in the body. Again, it sustains you during that heightened state of anger. It releases fat in your blood, like triglycerides and cholesterol increase in your body when that happens. Obviously, your pupils dilate because the brain says, I want to be able to take in as much information from my surroundings as possible in case I need to fight or run away, flee. Your blood leaves your face, and that's why if someone's terrified or scared, they say they look like they've seen a ghost. They turn pale white. Hands and feet get cold because blood leaves those, because the blood wants to go to the larger muscles. The complex centers of the brain actually shut down, and blood goes more to the primitive parts of the brain. So at that point, you're not really capable of proper thinking. Cognitive functions decrease. You become less like a human and more like an animal, where you're reacting. And that's why people, when they're angry, they do things they regret. Like hit a rock, as opposed to talk to the rock and honor God. So, digestion slows down and stops. That's why you'll notice in athletes, let's say I was on the track team in high school, and I remember before big races, I kind of felt a little nauseous, especially if we were nervous. And there were people who would go behind the bushes and throw up and then come back and run the race, because the body says, hey, digestion is stopping, we need to get rid of what's in there, because then we're going to be able to run faster and better. The other thing that slows down and stops is the immune system. Because the body says, I want all resources geared towards either fighting or running away. And so the immune system slows down. So people who get angry, all these things happen to sustain you. The same thing happens when we get scared. Same things go into effect. So if we're being attacked by something, we're being chased by a pack of hungry wolves, those are the things that happen, which are designed to keep you going. You get supernatural strength, actually, from the adrenaline that comes in. That's what you'll hear. There was a news report about a lady in her 40s who picked up a car off a child. Again, the adrenaline, all these things happening, the nervous system controlling things, that's all short-term good, but not when it's with anger, because we let anger fester and stay. We hold on to it. And if someone angered us, what do? We replay that video in our mind over and over, and every time we replay it, then we feel those emotions again, and the body does that same thing. And then if you tell that story to 20 other people, 20 other times you relive that, and you get all those emotions right back up, and then the body does the same thing. So now this person has cholesterol problems, because their body's releasing cholesterol. Why does the body release cholesterol? Because it's the precursor to estrogen and testosterone and progesterone and growth hormone and all the things, and cortisol, all the things that the body needs, but the precursor is cholesterol. So that's why you mobilize cholesterol. So someone who's a high-stress person, angry all the time, always has high cholesterol. That person also has dry skin, dry mouth, dry eyes. Because in a state of heightened awareness, like anger, the blood leaves the face and focuses on the muscles.
Yeah.
That's the person who always makes bad decisions.
Huh.
Because the cerebral cortex isn't working as much as the primitive parts of the brain, the brainstem. So that person has high blood pressure because the heart's pumping harder and faster because it thinks you're going to have to fight someone. So blood pressure's high, cholesterol's high.
Yeah.
Dry skin, dry eyes, dry mouth. Cold hands and cold feet. Those are the people who say, even in the summer, my hands and feet are always cold.
Huh.
That's a stress issue. That's an anger issue, potentially. Now, it could be just an anxiety issue or a fear issue. Same thing happens when you relive your fears over and over. When you worry about worst case scenario instead of having faith that we're going to be taken care of, that we're putting our trust in God. That person has a suppressed immune system. That's the one who catches colds all the time, sinus infections. They're the ones who say, I get 3-4 sinus infections a year. You shouldn't even get one. It's not easy to get a sinus infection unless your immune system is suppressed. Well, the immune system gets suppressed if this person's angry all the time. Digestion, same thing. Heartburn, acid reflux, and indigestion. That person doesn't digest their food properly, so constantly getting that regurg because they're in a stress issue. And that person has a lot of constipation because the bowels don't move fast enough, properly enough. So all of that is what happens when someone's angry. They have anger problems like our prophet Moses, and it haunts him for his whole life.
Dr. Amir, some would say that anger is working for me. Like, for instance, John McEnroe.
Yes.
He was a famous tennis player.
That's right.
And he played for like the Wimbledon championship, and
Yes.
he would debate a call with a line judge and believe that the ball was out or the ball was in, and then he would sort of get into an argument. But somehow he would play better tennis when he was angry than when he played not angry. So actually he would get into debates with the line judge, sort of pump himself up and like play better. Is that true that anger works for us?
You know, I would love to have at that time been there to check his pulse and measure his blood pressure. There is a range of pulse blood pressure where we actually do become superhumans in a good way. They said, do you remember Larry Bird, played basketball, right? They said he had eyes in the back of his head and the game slowed down for him and he knew where everything was. Now, when you study people who are being arrested, or you hear this story all the time in the news where a teenager is in the wrong place at the wrong time. Police are looking for someone else. They see this teenager and they say freeze. He goes into a state of fight or flight, but he goes too high into that state, where his pulse is actually higher than 120, 130 beats a minute. It goes up higher. Blood pressure goes up higher. That person, instead of being able to see better, they see less. They get tunnel vision. Their hearing may actually shut down. So when the police say, don't move, he doesn't hear them, and he runs. The police say, put your hand up. And he goes, I want to call my mother, and he reaches in his pocket to pull his cell phone out. And he gets shot because the police don't know if he's pulling a gun or if he's pulling something else out of his pocket. So that can happen. But Larry Bird used to get in that state. But his blood pressure never went above a certain level, and his heart rate apparently stayed around 120 beats a minute. It never went up too high. Now, in that range, you actually can have better peripheral vision, more blood to the eyes, pupils are in the right, you have better peripheral vision, your thought process speeds up, which means everything gets slow. Police officers talk about this. They say that when they were shot at, they could see the bullet slowly approach them. So life slows down for them and they can see more. That's what was happening with Larry Bird. So it could be that John McEnroe was the same, where he'd get himself in that state, but he wouldn't let his heart rate go up too high, and he'd actually be more aware. So the ball coming at him, that tennis ball, was actually moving slower for him. So he could see it, he could place it, he could put it in the right place, and he needed that anger to do that. It's very possible.
So it seems as if there's an anger where we get into a zone where we become more effective, and then an anger where we can become less effective. Moses seems to be operating here in a very less effective zone, where his judgment was impaired.
Exactly.
And he's doing things he wouldn't normally do
Yes.
because he's sort of out of his zone.
Right.
He's internalized all this complaint and murmuring, and now he's sort of acting out his anger.
Exactly.
Yes.
Exactly. Well, I don't know if either one is healthy long term.
Mm.
So I would assume, and I have no knowledge of the health of John McEnroe and how how his organs are doing and so on. If he's healthy, my assumption is he spent more time on the other end of the spectrum than he did at that anger state. And maybe he only got angry on the court.
Yeah.
And there were times where he actually relaxed. Imagine you eat a big meal, and it's a meal you love and enjoy. And you eat this meal with a little bit of wine. And now you're sitting in front of the TV after that meal. You feel full. You feel satisfied. You're calm. You put your feet on the coffee table. You lounge. It doesn't matter what's on TV. You're kind of enjoying it because you're dozing off. And you start to shut your eyes. Your eyelids feel very heavy. At that point, your pupils are constricted, not dilated. Your hands feel warm, not cold. Your heart rate and blood pressure are lower. Digestion is at its peak, and the body is repairing and regenerating. So that's the exact opposite. So we need to spend more time in a state. Now that's an extreme, but for the most part, the person who has balance of emotions and doesn't allow anger to get the best in him or her, that person spends more time in what we call parasympathetic, or we also call it rest and repair.
Yeah.
As long as they spend more time in that, then this doesn't harm them as much. Now, I don't think John McEnroe, based on the level of intensity he allowed his anger to get to, I don't think he was making proper choices and decisions. I know for a fact he insulted quite a few people, and I have a feeling it probably backfired on him, so who knows?
Yeah.
Who knows with him? But it's just not healthy long term.
So you're saying there's a balance then between our autonomic and our parasympathetic nervous systems, where we have this fight or flight, and
Yes.
we also have the rest and repair.
Yes.
So how would you advise our listeners to sort of like navigate that space between sort of the two systems?
Yeah. So awareness is number one.
Yeah.
Is the minute you're triggered, and by trigger I mean someone pushed your button, and you're feeling that anger, you need to be aware that that's there. And the minute you're aware, then you can maybe perhaps control it. Slow exhales usually reduce that sympathetic response. So think about this. If we're sitting here right now and the walls start to shake and the ceiling tiles start falling on us, are we going to say, phew? Or is it more likely we'll say,
I think
a big
surprise,
inhale?
yeah.
And inhale is the sympathetic response. Slow exhale is the exact opposite. The problem is solved. We're not worried about it.
Yeah.
So if we're angry and we don't want to stay angry, we don't want it to have a negative effect on our bodies, then a few slow exhales will kind of start to change that state.
Wow.
And if someone has, let's say, high blood pressure and high cholesterol, when they should be doing specific breathing exercises where they do deep inhale and a slow exhale, where the exhale takes twice as long as the inhale. Take 10 breaths in the morning, 10 in the evening, and do it also when you're trying to go to sleep. I don't know if you've noticed, but there are a lot of people who say, I am tired all day, but I can't sleep at night. We call that wired and tired. They can't go to sleep. Well, they can't go to sleep. The same reason if I was being chased by a pack of hungry wolves, I wouldn't be able to stop and take a nap. Same exact reason. We've talked about this before. So that's why. They're in that heightened state. They're in that sympathetic response. Their autonomic nervous system is stuck in the sympathetic, and it's not going into parasympathetic. And it needs to do that. It has to do that. So read the word, learn from Moses, right? That's another one. So slow exhale, be aware, slow exhales, read something positive, and get around people who you enjoy being around, and then make sure you're eating the right foods. Have a nice meal with a couple of friends that you enjoy, and then go sit on that couch, put your feet on the coffee table. So you can't possibly make good decisions in that state.
Yeah.
Not only are you going to do the wrong thing that you will regret, you're also making yourself sick, and you're dishonoring God.
Yes. It seems as if Moses went into the presence of the Lord and began to rehearse what he's going to say to the people, versus relinquish his feelings to the Lord.
I've done that.
His quiet time with God got ruined by,
That's right.
by sort of playing ahead what he would be saying to the
That's
people,
right. Yeah.
versus letting God be in control
That's right.
and resting. It seemed like he internalized other people's stress.
Right.
Do you think
Right.
we do that, Dr. Amir? We internalize people's stress?
Of
We
course.
bring it inside ourselves.
Of course.
It's their issues, it's not our issue. These people are complaining out of their unbelief,
Right.
but Moses was responsible for himself, not for them.
Yes. Isn't there a verse in the Bible where God tells someone they're not mad at you, they're mad at me, or they're not? Where is that? Is it one of the prophets, or
I think it's one of the prophets.
maybe Samuel or something? But where God actually says they're not dishonoring you. I think it's when people say we want a king. Don't they go to the prophet and say we want a king? And God has said no. I'm going to give you prophets, not kings. And they ask for a king, and this prophet is really upset talking to God, and God says they're not upset with you. They're dishonoring me. Don't be offended.
Yes.
And the same thing with him is Moses should have said, oh, these people are turning against God, not me. And I certainly don't want God to be dishonored, but I need to obey God. I can't also disobey. I can't also dishonor God the way they're dishonoring God.
So it seems very possible for us to get too much CNN or Fox News.
Oh my
And
goodness.
internalize all this stress.
Yes.
We can't fall asleep at night.
Yes.
Or we're worried about problems late at night, and we're sort of like wired and tired.
Yes.
Versus relinquishment through prayer,
Absolutely.
doing our part, but putting in God's hands the part we can't do, and being able to rest in the
Yes.
sovereignty of God.
Yes. How many times do we sit there in our quiet time when we're praying to our Lord, and all we do is dish out all these problems, and things we're concerned about, and then say amen and go, as opposed to saying, okay, God, I'm concerned, but I want to hear from you.
Yes.
God, I'm concerned, but you're my Lord. Help me.
Yes.
And listen and allow that prompting of that Holy Spirit to be in you. Say, God, bring me the peace, and you're not rehashing so many problems all the time anymore. And then what we do is we put out all our problems, then we pack it up, package it nicely, put it back in our heart, and carry it with us wherever we go. We should actually lay it at the cross.
It's been said before, Dr. Amir, that we have to spend time with people to know their problems, but we have to spend time with God to know how to deal with their problems. And God will give us wisdom,
Yes.
to know what to do and the courage to do it.
Yes.
And we have to spend time with Him to know how to respond to people's problems.
Well put.
Yes.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So how is it that, and you're certainly one of those people.
Yeah.
Well, I'm around you and I see the peace of Jesus in you. I see it and I see joy.
Mm-hmm.
I know firsthand personally that you haven't had an easy year last year.
Mm-hmm.
Nobody would know it being around you
Mm-hmm.
because you carry the peace and the joy with you.
Mm-hmm.
Can you talk about how you do that?
Well, I've come to believe that in this world we'll have tribulation and trials. It won't be easy. It'll be difficult. There'll be disappointments and setbacks, but oftentimes our setbacks are really a setup to trust God more.
Mm-hmm.
So what I find is that when I get hard times, I remember what James says, that consider it pure joy, my brothers, when you encounter various trials, knowing the testing your faith produces endurance. And let endurance have its perfect result, that you may be mature and complete, lacking nothing. I'm expecting that there will be trials. I'm also expecting that God's going to give me endurance and perseverance through them, because He's perfecting my faith. It really is an opportunity for me to trust Him more. So the way I get through things is I trust God.
That's great.
Yeah.
That's great. Well, I certainly would like to be more like that myself, and I certainly pray that our listeners can also do the same thing.
Yeah. So maybe we'll walk you through all the stuff of the last year.
Yeah. Exactly.
Yeah.
Fantastic. Thanks very much.
Thank you, Dr.